Hi, everyone. I hope you can hear me. Great. Let's wait for 5 minutes, and then we can start. By the way, for those who are presenting, probably you can share your screen, but you can also upload the slides on Data Tracker. If you have any doubt, let me know in the chat and I can give you the link.
Sorry to be late.
Again.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Great. There we go.
Okay, so maybe we can start. What do you think, Jane? Are you ready? So let me check that the presenters are there. But I don't see Steve, and I don't see Matogoro either.
Them on WhatsApp. I think the new format of logging in may have caused a little bit of time delay. I know it did for me, and I want to apologize to everyone for being a little late. My father had a heart stroke over the on Friday, so I've had to come up to be with my mother. So give me 1 second.
I'm sorry. Well, bear in mind that this session is broadcasted on YouTube.
It's like life is different these days, that's for sure. Hang on 1 sec.
So, well, anyway, I think we can start, and then we can adjust the agenda according to the people present, and then. So, well, as usual, bear in mind that we have the not well slides about the intellectual property and in what we agree when we participate in the IRTF. If you know of any contribution covered by patents or patent applications, you should disclose it and not participate in the discussion. And I think it's known well, and it is well known in all the IETF meetings. And you know that the recording is made public. In fact, it's broadcasted on YouTube. And this is the policy, privacy policy, and you know we have to talk with respect, and there are RFCs about how to behave. And then you know that the IRTF is about conducting research. It's not about developing standards, but it's connected to the IETF activities related to standard development. And we have published, in fact, one RFC that today we are also going to discuss about how to revise it and update it. And then just a reminder of the charter of the Gaia working group that is about the reality of the digital divide, that we are just successful with half of the population, let's say, but there are barriers, and there are in participation. And this is the list of individual objectives, but I won't go into detail here. As usual, it's there. You can look at it later on the repository with the slides. And then going to the core of the meeting today, we scheduled 4 presentations, one about the white space television in Tanzania from Matagoro, another about the trouble of the spectrum from Steve Song, and a third one from Marco Zenaro. And then in the last item, we are going to go through some slides and some discussion on the revision of the RFC that we produced several years ago. So this is more or less the agenda. You know that there is the chat channel as well, and as I said at the beginning, if you can upload, and I need to do that too, the slides on the data tracker, that allows people to facilitate process, especially if you cannot for some reason share the screen, or if you come later, you can look at the slides later on. So regarding the first 3 presentations, unless unless Matagoro and Steve have joined, I think we could start with Marco.
Steve will be joining, but I think you're right. Let's start with that first. The time zone and the time change in the east coast of the U.S. has thrown some things off. Matagoro is having trouble with the registration. It's not accepting his registration. But oh, there's Marco. Voila. So Marco's here. So go for it. I'll try and get the others alerted.
Let us know if you can share your screen if you are going to use the slides.
Okay, sorry, I was muted. Leandro, I think I asked to share my screen. There's a screen request. I don't know if that has to be approved.
Let me see. I don't see the request. Oh, now it's starting.
Okay. Yep. There we go. Marco, you're good to go, yeah?
Okay. I'm trying to share my. Okay.
Your other screen, perhaps. Yeah, we see your slides.
And your audio is broken for me. Let me.
We can see your screen. So.
I suppose you can stop sharing the screen and share the other screen if you want to do that with the slides.
Nope, you're still there. Okay, bravo.
Okay, can you hear me? Yes. Okay, excellent. Now let's see the second. Or Leandro, do you want to show my slides if you have access to them through the repository? Maybe that's easier.
I saw that you requested screen sharing, but I couldn't really find how to approve it.
So I approved it, and
Okay.
try again, Marco. Give it a shot. You see the thing that looks like a TV or a computer monitor? Click on that above your name, below your, yeah, it would be right below your name. There are some icons. Thanks, folks, for hanging with us. This is a great presentation, and Steve Song will be joining us too. We just got through. Maybe we should, I'm not showing mine. I don't have that enabled, so should be good to go for Marco. Is there anyone from Meet Echo on with us? No. Okay. We'll get there. Did Marco drop? All right.
Well, I managed to download the slides.
Voila, okay,
Yes.
Okay.
yeah, bravo.
Let's see if Chrome behaves. Okay, let me ask to share my screen.
In Chrome, so maybe that'll help. And so, yes, you should be, I'm granting screen. Ready?
Oh, it looks much better now. Okay. Give me just 1 second. We're almost there.
So I just want to give a quick intro to Marco, then you hop in. I had the pleasure of seeing Marco in Trieste, where he's at the International Center for Theoretical Physics. He and Hermano Pietro Somoli, for those of you that know Hermano, who's done so much work in Latin America. They've got a world's record for a Wi-Fi ping from one place to another, but they do a lot of other amazing work and have a brilliant facility for training. And we're going to hit them up at some point in time. But Marco, over to you.
Okay, thank you very much, Jane, and sorry for the technical glitch. So this presentation was supposed to be the last one because it was really a call for your ideas on how to in some way get back to normal. So presentation is together with Kanchana from AIT in Thailand. I don't know if Kanchana was able to join today, but the idea came from a meeting we had with Jane a couple of months ago, and it was really about staying in touch. So in the old days, pre-COVID, we used to meet each other either at conferences or workshops. So a couple of times every year, I had the chance to meet Jane somewhere, or Kanchana somewhere, or other colleagues from the community, Steve or Matagoro. But that's of course not possible anymore. So we thought that there is this lack of exchanging the latest news about technology and about our research. So this was a call to discuss how we can in a way coordinate these meetings so that we can in a short time, in let's say 1 hour slot, get the latest updates about specific technologies or research or issues that our community is interested in. And so the idea was to have different venues. So Jane kindly cited ICTP could be one, but we are all part of different organizations or university or institutions. So hosting people once a month and having these short talks, 15 to 20 minutes, presentations about the latest updates. So no, background information or, telling the whole story, but what is the latest news in specific topics? In my case, it would be Internet of Things or machine learning on the edge. And then having more time for discussion, questions and answer, and experience sharing. So for example, showing the labs, showing the latest, devices and discussing the latest research. And of course, there's many more, topics that can be covered. Jobs is number 4 here. And for example, I had some openings for postdoc positions, and I would have loved to exchange that information with people in the community, or fellowship, internships, projects, matching interest in looking for funding together. And we listed here just some of the topics where we know that there has been a lot going on in the last 2 years, but we didn't really have the chance to discuss it with colleagues. Satellite would be one, and I don't know if Steve is here, but there's a lot going on in the field of satellite, both from the technical point of view, but also from the policy point of view. Status of connectivity, again, lots going on in the last 2 years. And so having presentation about what is the current status in different continents, would be very nice. IoT and machine learning on the edge, that's me again. And I think that's really promising for our ICT4D community. Spectrum sharing and TV white space. Again, I know Steve is going to give a presentation. Learning from other colleagues working in this field would be very nice. Community networks, a topic which is of interest to ISOR, but to many of us as well, and others. I mean, there is lots going on in many other fields. So again, this is a call. If you're interested, if you're willing to give a talk or to host one of these talks and meetings, you're more than welcome. I don't know how we can organize it, maybe through Gaia, so you can get back to the chairs if you have any proposal, any suggestion. And I really look forward to hearing from you about this idea. Back to you, Jane.
And for those that are new to Gaia or not so new, this would be just a really interesting informal way for us to do a mashup and a meetup, as Marco is saying. I mean, we had a great chat with Kanchana, who, for those of you that haven't met her, she helped host and do a lot of the work behind the scenes for the Thailand, the Bangkok IETF a few years ago. She is considered the I don't want to say grandmother, the mother of the internet in Thailand. And in addition to being just a lovely human, she's really done more to bring the internet to Thailand than just about anybody we know. And we worked closely with her from our side to help establish a neutral IXP as well, with Randy Bush and NSRC and many others. And it was this typical internet community collaboration. We got some amazing switches donated with the help of some of the equipment manufacturers we work with. And she's gotten training with the community, and they really have a world-class IX right now, ISO certified. And so when you have that collaboration, it's some of the heart of what we know is to help build the internet that we have today, and of course, continue to build. So the great news is that by having a chat recently with Marco and Kanchana, and I think Leandro and I were chatting about this too, there's a challenge she has in one of the poorer parts of Bangkok with corrugated steel roofs. And so when you're trying to send a signal down from a high point into the area that she's trying to connect, you've got to figure out where to bring the signal down, how to distribute it at a lower level so that the steel and the building materials are not blocking the signals. And so this could be a situation where if we had a salon, if it were called that, or whatever we want to call it, a meetup, a community meetup, in between the Gaia meetings and other, that we'd be able to hack that together. I mean, many of you who are on the regional internet registry groups have also seen real time on their listservs, real time people helping each other saying, hey, let's take it offline. I've had that same problem with V4 or V6. So it's that kind of spirit of how we could hack things in real time together. So there you go. And yeah, you could get back to me and Leandro through the, and or Marco. I'm happy to have people to contact you, Marco. It's up to you, where we could make sure we set something up. That would be more informal. We'd probably do it by Zoom, just to make it easier to log in to the system. So are there anyone with any thoughts in the chat? I haven't been monitoring the chat right now. Socorro, is that you? Yay, bravo, all the way from Tanzania. Leandro, oops, sorry, you just saw the cat. This cat is fascinated by the fact that I have my computer up. Anyway, so that was a nice chat from Marco, who we had put our heads together a couple months ago to talk about the importance of staying together informally in an easy breezy way. For some of you that don't know me, we often will have these tech chats with folks just informally around the planet, just to see what people are doing to keep us all together during COVID and to keep innovating. I think, Leandro, I can go ahead with Matagoro now, yeah? And we can push the
Well, just Maybe one quick comment before doing this. So is that regarding what Marco said, the best way to start would be to maybe organize one of these meetings, and then people can then all together see how it works and propose replicate experience. But I think the first experience is going to be fundamental to show that it works. So if you or anyone has an initial topic to have such a meeting, let's try. Because for instance, Jane was talking about like the challenge Kanchana was dealing with, and then that could be also, for instance, one example of a meeting where we sit together to discuss about that case and propose solutions.
Super. Leandro, just a question. So can we organize that through Gaia in some way?
Yeah, sounds like that. I mean, beyond the meetings during IETF, yeah, we have a mailing list, and we can that's typically called an interim meeting. So we can have a meeting without having all of us to be registered into the IETF, and only through Zoom or any other tool that would be easier to set up and less. I mean, we can invite anyone, and joining the list is simply requesting it and accepting the membership. So I think it's a lightweight way to discuss on topics which are hot or promising or interesting.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marco, for your presentation and the proposal. So shall we then move to the next, unless there is any other comment from the audience, we can move to, I don't know, Matagori, if you are ready for presenting after dealing with the struggles of going through a password and in the data tracker system. Do you have some slides to share?
I think I could just speak. I
Okay.
had some, but I would prefer just talking, sharing my experience on.
Yeah. Anyway, there is the repository for documents. If you want to later on upload or send me any document you want to share with the audience related to what you are going to talk, it's always welcome as well.
Okay.
Okay, so
sure, I will
free.
do that. I have a few slides, like 5 slides. I will try to share to you so that you can upload and people can access.
Okay. Perfect.
Yeah, thank you. And I think I'm glad and honored to be part of this discussion. And it was marked in my calendar, and I was trying to log in and getting some difficulties. But thanks for Jen Coffin for the support, and finally I'm able to log in. And I'm also happy to meet Marco Zenaro. I remember we met Marco in 2013 in Lusaka, in one of the AFNOG workshop. And afterwards, we have been working. I also remember when I was struggling setting up a connection in Kondoa on the antenna orientation and things like that. And it was not that much easy, Marco, and I'm also glad to report that despite of the struggle, we have been able to be recognized by IEEE Connecting the Unconnected Challenge, and we become the second place winner, and we are able to be recognized there. So the struggle paid finally. And maybe what I wanted to share as part of this discussion is that connecting the unconnected is not a one-man show. And I also came to realize that it requires a matter of smart partnership among stakeholders. And when I started in 2014, almost 7 years back and a few months, I thought is something that is straightforward, and my PhD research was triggered by just asking a question: why is broadband internet so expensive in Tanzania? And at that time, in the literature, there was a lot of factors that were being reported, including maybe spectrum cost, including infrastructure and others. And actually, I thought maybe there is a missing affordable technology. And finally, I think it was 2013 when our president signed, the president of the United Republic of Tanzania at that time was the fourth president, when they signed a memorandum of understanding with Microsoft on undertaking the TV white space in urban Tanzania. And at that time, they were planning to connect few higher learning institutions, and they tied up device provision as part of their own to higher learning institution, and also access to Microsoft softwares and products. And in 2000, I was also part of the coordinator of the Microsoft Innovation Center at the University of Dodoma. So it was quite easy for me to jump in and try to work. Working with them was somewhat good, but as you might be aware that most commercial organizations normal restrict new entry, especially when new person is coming to the team. So it was not that much easier for me to join. And because there was also a skill gap, because my first degree was on computer science and my second degree was on computer science, and I was jumping to the PhD in telecommunication engineering. So I decided to join the Indian Institute of Technology, Mumbai, for 6-month fellowship. And once I came back, because the team realized that I had the right skills, because while at India, I was participating on the TV WiFi deployment in India, and we are connecting some of the school and rural in India. So almost 6 months. And once I come back, the team realized that I was having the right skills. So they also came back to me, and we started a kind of partnership and working together, a special access to some of the devices. However, in 2017, we had an online meeting with Malco and Elman from ICTP Italy, and we decided that we can set up. At that time, I think Malco proposed something like maybe community network, but it was a new term, and in Tanzania, it was actually a new term to me personally, and actual in the ground. And when we submitted to Internet Society through the Beyond the Net funding, we were able to secure funding from the Internet Society. And afterwards, the University of Dodoma also procured some of the equipment as part of my research, and we started the deployment in Kondoa. And finally, we were able to set up a rink. However, the cost for bandwidth was so expensive, because 4 Mbps, we are paying around 1,000 USD per month. And on top of that, we were also paying the co-location fee, which was around 400 USD, because it was 700,000 Tanzania shillings, so around maximum approximately to 400 USD. So you can imagine a rural community paying per month almost 1,400 just for 4 Mbps. It was somewhat very expensive for sustainability. But because our target was to see how the technology and the community engagement can complement and address the digital divide. Afterwards, the University of Dodoma secured the academic authorization letter from the local regulator, and we were able to get the 2-year academic license with the local regulator. So after 2 years expired, then we were alerted by the regulator that we have to switch off the devices. And at that time, we were also hosting the 4th summit in Africa, the 4th summit on community network in Africa. And we tried to request at least 2 weeks the devices to be on, and because as part of the summit, we also had the site visit to Kondoa. So the ministry and the national regulator, they were able to allow a two weeks permission to switch on the devices. And after the summit, then we were instructed to switch off the devices. So since 2009, devices are there in site, but they are off because the regulator said TV white space have not yet got the regulations, so we are not allowed to use the devices up to the moment. We have struggled to bring the government on board for a discussion, and a very recent, I think was in May, one of the youth in Kondoa who was benefiting the service, internet service, wrote an open letter to the the Prime Minister. It was a WhatsApp message that was broadcasted through various channels. I think the message was wrote in the midnight, and good luck in the morning at 8 a.m. The letter was on the desk of the Prime Minister, and the Prime Minister forwarded the message to the minister cabinet, to the cabinets, and now people were, the ministers were now running here and there to find why the devices are off, who were behind it. And it was really, at that time, I remember it was on May, and it was really a headache for me, because you can imagine the minister phoning you that we need to meet, the permanent secretary calling you that Matogoro, what is happening, the vice chancellor is calling. So it was really very hectic, and actually I was not even aware what was going on. And finally, I was also able to get the access to the message, and found the guy who wrote that message. It was actually just sending out a message that we benefited from the service. Unfortunately, the service is off because of the regulations. So they were asking if the Prime Minister can intervene and switch on the devices. So that message brought a new chapter, actually, because now the Ministry of Communication and Information Technology struggled to bring on board all the stakeholders that were engaged, the university, the community networks. Although in the meeting it was not that much easier, because everyone was complaining that if this work were completed, why devices are still there in the field, and if community network are in need of using the approach, they also advise that they have to follow the current procedure. At the moment, if a community network wants to operate in Tanzania, you have to register a private company in the business registration organization called BRERA. And afterwards, you have to, using the registered limited company or private company, you have to apply for the license. Actually, there are almost 4 market segmentation for the license. You can apply for the district level, you can go for the regional, you can go to the national level or international. There are 4 market segments for the license. So after that discussion, you can imagine almost 7 years doing the same initiative, but the regulator was not ready to listen what we are trying to propose until the message was received to the Prime Minister. So afterwards, it's when the regulator came with the blaming that we are trying to, report them and something like that. But finally, they were able to give us the option that if you want to use the community-based kind of approach, then the community needs to register a limited company to the business registration organization, business registration license organization, and then afterwards they have to apply for the license, and then the procedure can go on. Because they are saying for them to assess either they give you a license, they assess two things. They assess the financial aspects and also the technical aspects. So if you go as a not-for-profit organization, then it is hard for them to assess financial because you've already said you are not for profit. So afterwards we struggled. Then how do we make it? Because if you want to make as a limited company, that means you have to go through the traditional approach with where most of commercial ISP are doing. And in that way, you also get subjected to a lot of tax that you have to pay. Although very recently, the ministry also sent out the public comment on regulation and enacting some of the regulations. And we also try to give out our recommendation and inputs. One of the critical suggestions that we gave out is that, yes, we appreciate the initiative of going through the commercial approach that is being directed by the regulator, but we are requesting at least for the community, for organization or ISP owned by cooperative, at least to be exempted from paying the universal access fund. Because if we are commercial ISP, then you also have to contribute to the universal communication service basket, which is also another cost on top of that. So we are still on that discussion, but what I appreciate is that at least we are now in a way to know what could be the best approach for community network to operate. That means we support them to establish a community network, and the community network, the registered cooperatives then register a limited company, and afterward the limited company on behalf of the cooperatives apply for the license. After the license, then after the limited company got the license, then they could apply and they can operate in the district level. And at the district level, I think is something that we can afford, because the license fee is around 250 USD, and the registration fee is 50 USD. So making a total of 300 USD, getting the license as a district level. But if you go for the regional, it got to 1,500, and if you add up the license, the registration fee, the cost go high. If you go to the national, it's around 10,000 USD for the license fee, and you have to pay for registration fee. So we may not be able to go for the national because we started with only 5 community networks. So we opted that's better for these 5 community networks to go for the district level, because we can at least pay 1,500 USD for 3 or for these 5 community network. And afterwards, once we perform, then we can now go to maybe a national level if we see is something that is sustainable. And on top of the sustainability, we are now proposing a sustainable business model with 80 parameters, where we understand that partnership is key. So we have private-public partnership plus people, and the 50 parameter we're also adding up on income generating activity. That because commercial ISP are running away from rural community because they may not be afford to pay for the internet and other communication services. So for now, we are now trying to see how we can empower these rural people, especially by engaging them to some of the income generating activities. Because after, for example, things like poultry farming and sunflower cultivations and other similar income generating activities relevant to specific area. And the 6th parameter, we're also adding up on the capacity building, because some of the community members, if you ask them, they say, we cannot have a smartphone because we don't even know how to use it. So that means there is an issue of a digital retrace. And the seventh one is on the issue of local content. So we are trying to, you know, if you try to assess the current telecommunication ecosystem, it's like very fragmented in terms of bringing together all those seven parameters. So what we are trying to do is to rebuild the current telecommunication ecosystem using the community network cooperative as a way to bridge the digital divide. I was even trying to think, you can imagine maybe if a condition for one to own a SIM card was first you go through cooperative and afterwards you get a SIM card, and because if you go through the cooperative, that means you have to pay, you have to buy shares, and also you have to pay the entry fee, and afterwards you have to use the service. So I can imagine if cooperative approach were to be adopted by the existing commercial mobile network operators, then I understand even the issue of usage gap, which we are currently saying that, for example, in Tanzania, the usage gap is very high. You find people are living within the coverage gap, within the infrastructure coverage, but they are not using the services because you find all these parameters are fragmented. So we are trying to push this, and maybe what is our long run vision is probably we might reach a point where we have a big and strong internet service provider which is owned by cooperatives in Tanzania, because our target is to connect at least 20 million users in 10 years to come. So that's what I thought I could share, and maybe could also open up for discussion. Thank you.
Does anyone have any questions? You're describing something we've seen in many countries, Matagoro, with the difficulty that is imposed through the old system of licensing and spectrum allocation and assignment, and just small business, right? Because if you have to register and be authorized as a business and then pay all of the different fees, I didn't realize you had that many layers of licensing fees, because that's quite a lot. And you're just starting up, right? You're a startup, and so it's a nonprofit startup. And I think for those on the call here, when we say nonprofit startup, we don't mean that it's not a business-like entity, because I know Matagoro quite well. It's very business-like, but you're trying to get started, and if part of it is the hampered by the licensing, the fees. But I think you're seeing a change with the regulator, am I right? And the ministry, it took the prime minister to get them to change the spectrum allocation and other things. Yes, is that right?
I have a question, Matagoro. I was taking notes of your talk, and yeah, as Jen said, it's familiar, unfortunately. But how about today? I mean, how do you think the process you went through would help any other initiative in the country to have a better start, or to at least learn from your experience, or even take advantage of the path you opened for them?
Yeah. Actually, what we are, Leandro, what happened? I actually jumped in to advocate for community network. You can imagine the concept started to ring in my mind, I think it was 2016, 2017. But actually, I started rural connectivity since 2014, so almost 7 years. And I thought it's something that's simple, But I came to realize that it's very complex. And if one is not clever, you can just turn up like becoming like as an activist, and an endless activity. Because if you are also activating, try to advocate for something, you also try to to accommodate the existing regulatory frameworks. So we pushed for almost 4 to 5 years, and we realized that in this way it won't happen. So what we have seen is that if we push and have registered these, because we also managed to have, after having that approach, there are some other few Wholesale ISP that have already approached us. For example, we had a discussion with Ben Robert from Liquid Telecom, where he said Liquid Telecom is ready to support maybe rural-based or not-for-profit ISP, but having the license, the RIGO license from the local regulator. So we have seen that if we now have the license in the district level, we have other commercial ISP, but a similar mindset that can support the initiative, rather than just trying to push something that we never go through. So I see that what now is a way forward for me is because I have already directed my RIGO team. I have a very intelligent RIGO expert, Miss Elizabeth James, who is leading our team as the director of RIGO Services and Partnership. So they have already initiated the process of registering these 5 limited companies, and then they will take care of of applying the license on behalf of these cooperatives that have already established. And afterwards, after getting that license, then ISP like Liquid Telecom, who are supporting ISP in terms of wholesale bandwidth sharing, then they are ready to work with us, because we can even get the bandwidth reaching to all these districts that we have initiated. So to me, I see that it is opening up some doors, and we have already identified some of the similar-minded ISP who can tap on the advantage of the wholesale prices that they have, so that we can sell the price that is affordable with our community in these 5 established cooperatives. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I wonder if there's any other question from the audience. I see the comments in parallel of the discussion. Jane was talking about things related to what you, Matagoro, were presenting. So you might take a look later. And also Marco.
Their hands up. I did want to just ask one quick question myself. Sorry, I didn't hop into the queue properly. Matagoro, is the ministry and or the regulator now looking at TV white space as viable and other different innovative uses of spectrum for future connectivity? Because this won't go away, and obviously with COVID showing everybody that everybody needs to be connected, even more than normal. It's been the best advertising, I think, for a lot of what we all do in a weird way. Are they rethinking spectrum allocation and assignment? Not everything. I know some people get very excited when we talk about spectrum change, but what are you seeing, and just in general, because it would be interesting to hear that too.
Yeah, the good thing is that, you know, Jane, I think sometimes noises help, you know, because because of the noises that I've been doing, even very recently, the ministry secured, I think was it a grant or on from the World Bank on connectivity, and one of the solutions they are looking forward was a broadband over power line, and also the TV white space technology. So even the minister, the person in charge from the ministry on that project also approached me, and I was part of developing like something that we could try to take advantage of the TV white space. So I see things are happening, but there are still few engineers who are trying to give informations which are not correct. Like maybe one of the point that I heard when I had a conversation with the minister is that there was an advice that TV white space should be pended until WRC 2023 to decide on the direction. And one of the discussion in IEEE CTU, I was asking one of the guy from ITU who was responsible on the spectrum and standardization, and he said ITU does not have mandates on the ROCO spectrum management. So, but I think they're also playing like delaying techniques and something like that. But we are happy that the president the current president has mentioned that they need to increase broadband penetration from 43% to 80%. So that means they have to adopt different technology. And one something that I also noted that there was also confusion within the regulator, because they thought TV white space is going to replace other technology. But in the discussion, I mentioned that we are not advocating TV white space as a technology to replace others, but we just want to have multiple options. If one goes to Wi-Fi, it's okay. If one goes to fiber, it's okay. If one goes to TV white, but we are not mentioning that TV white space is going to replace mobile broadband, because the regulator is mentioning, there was a senior engineer saying that a mobile broadband is going to be able to address all the digital divide. But we are saying that we are not mentioning TV white space as a replacement of mobile broadband, but we just want to have TV white space as a complementary solution, maybe to have more options, because you may reach a point where you have only TV white space as an option to establish that ring. So afterward, I think we have seen that, and something that also noted is that most of the guys with the regulator started with a first job with the mobile network operators. Afterward, they shifted to the regulator. So you find they only understand that mobile is everything. Thank you, Jane.
Thank you, Marco.
Thank you, Motogora. I have a question. So what about these spectrum measurements? Remember at the beginning of this project, I think you carried out these spectrum measurements to show how much spectrum was available for TV white space. Has that been useful to start the discussion with the regulator?
Yeah, it was useful because we also managed to publish a paper in Springer, and I have seen it is one of the very downloaded paper in Springer. So maybe you may find even the same people who are against of it are the one making use of it. So at least we have scientific and academic evidence showing that the spectrum is underutilized, and in that way, in most cases, in most of the presentation we are doing, we also show that this is the situation, and it always isn't the discussion. So I think it was very helpful, and we are trying to push for that. There is a huge underutilization of the resources, and we should not wait 4 years or 3 years until WRC 2023 while people are not connected in rural. You can imagine, for example, if you see for school connectivity, you find around like 32% of secondary schools are only connected. And if you go to the primary school, it's only 39%, almost 40% have connectivity. So that means we need to have this kind of complementary. But I'm happy that they are now pushing that. Matuguri, you can now also apply again for the academic license, you care up, But I think things are opening up. It's quite different when I started things.
Goro, we also have Kanchana who can come in via voice. And Kanchana, you've probably seen some of the similar issues that Matagoro is seeing with respect to spectrum and the mentality or sort of the need to educate regulators, quite frankly, in ministries, because Matagoro, your point about waiting until 2023 for the World Radio Conference, no. And that's such a political conference. It'll be a LEO-based conference. They'll be talking about low Earth orbiting satellites and orbital slots, and it'll be quite a show. And so an important meeting, of course, treaty, but that will be crazy. And Kanchana, we're gonna.
Yes. Hello, everybody. I'm sorry I was late. Yeah. I think my experience and your experience is not so much different. But what I tried to do was I tried my best to avoid having to deal with regulator. So I always try to use the Wi-Fi, and we were given an opportunity to test TV white space, and we found that the technology was okay, but the problem was the equipment, the vendor in this technology are not ready to support us. So I think for Thailand, TV white space is kind of, put on the shelf from the regulator point of view and from our point of view as well. So from that experience, what happened is our community network, we also try to work in the area where you don't have connectivity and provider. And what happened is that after a few years, the providers started to come in. They realized that there's some demand for their services, and then they started to feel that we were their competitor. So things are starting to get difficult between us and provider themselves. But what happened is with the pandemic, you have demand for online classrooms, so online learning. So we took this opportunity to deal with the Bangkok slum area. So this is not a rural community network, but in a city community network. So we immediately take this opportunity to build a community in Bangkok area, and we spent about 3 months on this project already, and we have very good responses, and the people in the community really appreciate our help. So we, with this opportunity, you can talk to regulators, and they are nice at the moment because they want to see things moving. So everyone came to be our friend now. So I suggest that you try not fighting with regulator or government. Try to work around, and whenever there's opportunity arise, then you can get that understanding. This is my approach, and I think it's been working so far in my country. Yeah. So, thank you.
What are you finding from the technical perspective with respect to, you've got unlicensed spectrum, and you're lucky because in some countries they're still not unlicensing the Wi-Fi use of Wi-Fi?
We use whatever they allow us. They don't. We try to use equipment of from whatever is available in the market. We don't want to have problem with them. So it's difficult to set up, but yet we manage. So I think that because we try our best not to confront with the regulator, or not to go against them, because that would be would put yourself in a more difficult position than you know, they already feel that you are not one of them, and if you start to do something that is out of their you know, out of what they have to allow you to do, then you'll be in trouble, and they'll, you know, you cannot move from there. So from my experience is to try your best. You know, there are so many technical solutions that you can adopt and work, and try to follow whatever they allow you to, and talk to them, convince them, and then they once they see what you are doing, and they can, you know, they have witnessed your activity, then I think they begin to listen. So that's my approach, and I think it should work in many countries. Thank you.
That Kanchana, and I was about to
Yes.
type this in the chat, but I'll say this out loud, is that you're very lucky that you're able to use the unlicensed spectrum. For Jabera and others who are looking at innovative use of TV white space or CBRS or other, you run up against the old ways of working. And it's not just the old ways of working that are complicated, it's the fact that certain areas that don't have a certain income levels or are very far away, rural, remote, for many mobile operators, and this is where we want to be partners with mobile operators, because for some of them, they don't get a return on investment in communities of 5,000 and under. The ROI isn't there. So this is the business case. And we've talked to many, and we've talked to GSMA and some others. We've got to find a way to allow the smaller networks in. Of course, as we all know, the internet is made up of many different types of networks, the network of networks. And so to not allow more innovation in is kind of crazy. And so we run into these, you can't get through this bottleneck because it's regulatory, and you can't get through this bottleneck because you have very strong lobbying arms. And I'm not saying that there's got to be a way, as you're saying, Kanchana, wherever you are, to get through those bottlenecks.
I think what you need to do is to have a working solution that can convince them. So you need to start somewhere, and in order to do that, try to do your best within the whatever they have given you. So once you start to have a solution, they could see something working, then you can start, you know, convincing them and try to talk to telcos and get them to work with you. You have to start. This is my philosophy. It's not because I was like any of you, because I used to fight as well, and I found that it was more difficult to argue without anything in your hand. But once you have something in your hand, then it's easier to talk to them.
Yeah, actually, maybe Jenny, something that Kanchana is mentioning very true is that you need to have a working solution, and
yeah,
even Jenny, you can imagine we have been able to penetrate to this level because we was having TV white space offering solution, offering working solutions, and maybe something
but
that
did you
also
have a TV white space that's actually operating? Did you
yes, we because you know I wear many hats. So when I was doing this, because as an academic lecturer, then it's quite easy, because as part of my responsibility, I'm able to do three things: research, teaching, and doing public services or consultant. So it's quite easy going out as an academic to ask for that. But if you want to do research on sustainable business model, then at least you have to have some commercial aspects out of it, where there is a limited capacity for the academic institution to do that. That's why you also need to have maybe going out and starting collecting some revenue to see is it sustainable. And Katalo, you also mentioned something important like TV white space vendors. You know, even still,
Yeah, we had
devices,
very difficult
yeah,
time.
devices are still expensive. And what I'm also doing as part of my academic roles, we are now working with, I have few master's students who are working on open hardware and open software for TV white space devices, you know, because these courses are coming very expensive because having the very expensive devices, it also makes difficult to have a sustainable business model out of it. But we are hoping that once we have the economy of scales, if we have many deployments in Africa, then you find the cost of the devices will roll down, going to like it might not go like Wi-Fi devices, but to some extent they will go down once we have many countries like passing out the regulations like what South Africa has done, because South Africa is the only ICASA is the only regulator who has already approved the TV white space regulation has already gone to commercial deployment. So if we have many African countries having regulation in places, then there is a mass production of devices and the price will go down. And maybe something that I also wanted to add up is that maybe for Jane and few other fellows who we are trying to push the concept of community network, it's very important that when we are supporting community network, we should try to have a working case in their context. That means, for example, if we are supporting maybe a community network in DRC, we should try to analyze the regulatory framework and be a point where these community network can be able to get either a prototype or maybe just to set up a proof of concept, even if it's not a kind of a commercial per se, full commercial per se, but at least in a way, they should be able to have a proof of concept within the current regulatory framework. Because what is happening now is that we have a lot of people in Africa who are advocating for community networks, but they don't really have any community in their locations. Then it's become very difficult to make a point to move forward. But if these people in their context, they could find a way of getting maybe a permission or a trial or license or something like that for just a proof of concept to demonstrate, then it becomes very easy for the government to buy in. I think that's something that I normally give out when someone reach out that Matogoro, because most of the people are coming up that we want to set up this and this, but what I try to advise is that try to understand your regulatory framework and find a way where even before getting the fund, you have a way that if I have a funding, then I can buy equipment, I can use this technology, and then I can have the first deployment maybe within the first quarter of the project. In that way, you find things will move very fast. But having people talking a lot without having a proof of concept on board, then it's become difficult. Thank you.
And this is a perfect segue over to, oh, Kanchana, do you want to jump in?
No. It's okay. I think I'm the same. I am also a professor, so I use this position to do many things that normal people are not not allowed to do. Anyway, the idea is that you really need to have a working community network, and then you can convince regulator or policy maker. So right now we got a lot of requests from government people to visit our network, our site. So even the parliamentarian is asking to visit our community network. So you have to start making something that works, even though it's not connected to the internet, local community network, and have good utilization and application within the community. That is very important. Something that they can see, they can really, they would appreciate what you're doing. Yeah. So that's it. Thank you.
No, thank you, Kanchana. It's always important to hear from you because you're actually like Javera on the ground making something work and also working on the research side. So this is really important, not only for the Gaia community, but for everyone else out there who knows that you're trying to hack something and make it work. It's not just a hack. I mean, it's a longer term solution, but it has to see that it's actually viable.
Right.
The regulators and policymakers can really help us. And if they're not believers, as you said, Jabera, you've got to show them. The same with Kanchana.
Yeah.
I'm going to use this
So
as a segue.
they even say it's only Kanchana who can do it.
Well, and I think what will happily, Kanchana, I know you have a great team of researchers who work with you. So you're teaching them, I know, to hold the line. And both of you know the next person who we're going to have present, which is Steve Sung, one of our great colleagues who wears many hats, but has been doing great work on Spectrum with APC and other. And we're going to turn over the stage to you, Steve. So thank you very much, Jabera and Kanchana. That was fabulous. And Steve, over to you.
Thanks, Jane, and lovely to hear Kanchana and to see and hear Madagoro. I'm going to try and share my screen. Can everyone see my screen all right?
Yeah, perfect.
Okay. So, I mean, all of the discussion so far, both Kanchana's and Madagoro's experience resonate with me. Access to Spectrum is something I've been working on for a number of years. In a variety of roles. So I'm a half-time policy advisor with Mozilla Corporation. I work with the APC on policy and regulation for community networks. And I've also worked with NSRC and other institutions on these issues. I think the biggest problem, we have to contextualize the issue of Spectrum. It's not just an academic issue. It's not just a kind of theoretical problem. It's a real problem we face today because what we see is declining growth in the spread of internet infrastructure. So there are more and more people getting connected, but they're getting connected at a slower and slower rate. And that applies to the internet. It also applies to mobile users in general. And the reason why is pretty straightforward. And you could sum it up in one sentence in saying, we've connected the easy half of the world. The unconnected now are the people with the lowest ability to pay, living in the most challenging areas, often sparsely populated. So we need to think of different ways of solving the problem, because current approaches are not enough. I mean, they have achieved remarkable things, but they are not enough. And I think this has really come home as a result of the pandemic, right? Because what we've learned from the pandemic is not just the importance of connectivity, but the importance of inclusion. Because if you have access to the internet during the pandemic, you can survive a lockdown, in terms of, being able to access education, continue to participate in the workforce, and to stay abreast of changes that are affecting everyone. Whereas if you have no access, all of that you are excluded from. And as the resource that is the internet gets better and better, people without access are falling further and further behind, even by just standing still. So it tells me, the lesson I learned from this is that inclusion is actually the policy the policy directive we need to go after, as opposed to simply competition, which is how most regulation is formulated these days. So I think of it this way. I mean, I would describe it as telecom regulation as being like a filling a jar with stones. So if you can imagine taking a fist-sized stone and sticking it in a glass jar, there may be 3 or 4 or 5 you can fit in the jar, and the jar seems full. But if you fill that jar with water, actually the water occupies still more than 50% of the volume. So what we need from a regulatory point of view is regulation that is designed to enable smaller operators so they can fill in those niche gaps, those other areas, whether it's with niche technologies or with different business models, and that we can begin to see, achieve inclusion by allowing these smaller, more nimble, more innovative operators, whether they are community networks or nonprofit operators, to fully achieve affordable internet access for all. So when it comes to spectrum, we basically have 2 types of spectrum that we can talk about, which is unlicensed or licensed. So unlicensed or license exempt spectrum is what we popularly know as Wi-Fi. And I should say, the reason we have licenses, the reason why we have spectrum management is for one reason only, which is to manage interference, so that one person's use of wireless spectrum does not impede the use of another. And the 2 approaches here of doing that are embedded in either written regulations or with regulations embedded in the technology itself. So with license exempt Wi-Fi use, the rules are embedded in the technology itself. So Wi-Fi, first of all, speaks very quietly. So, if you can imagine a crowded room where everybody's whispering with each other, everything, it works very well. Whereas if everybody started shouting, it would be difficult for people to understand each other. And Wi-Fi is also very polite. So the rules embedded there include a listen before talk mode, which means that if somebody else is using the Wi-Fi spectrum, then the Wi-Fi device waits until they're finished. And that has enabled the massive proliferation of Wi-Fi devices simply by embedding these simple rules in the devices, whereas licensed technology creates an exclusion zone for the spectrum user. Typically, this is a national license that sets out a certain range of frequencies that are completely cleared for that operator's use. And now, because the demand for that spectrum has gone up, the cost of that spectrum has grown. So, when we give access to spectrum, in such as Wi-Fi, amazing things happen. We've seen Wi-Fi turn into a multi-trillion-dollar industry, over the course of the last sort of 15 years or so. But it has limitations. And the limitation is really in that power output, because if you want to cover an entire town or a village, you may need dozens or even hundreds of Wi-Fi devices to be actually able to offer coverage. Whereas in licensed spectrum, where the power output levels are allowed to be much higher, a single base station could cover an entire town. So there's this kind of tension between the 2. And while mobile has been extremely successful, it's kind of a victim of its own success, especially in emerging markets. So here's some examples of prices paid at auction by operators in sub-Saharan Africa. And you can see that the sums paid are significant. I'll point out in Nigeria in 2016, MTN paid nearly $100 million for a spectrum license in 2.6 gigahertz. which, you know, has many consequences. One is they have to recoup that $100 million. So where are they going to invest their technology? Well, they're going to invest their technology where they're most likely to gain returns, and which has an impact on rural rollout. And you know, regulators and governments recognize this to some degree and have attempted, you know, programs like universal service funds to kind of stimulate the rural rollout, but it has been a limited success in pushing that. And so but the real, for me, you know, in the context of this conversation, the real negative output of spectrum auctions, while it has enabled these big stones in the jar, these big operators, it has effectively locked out smaller operators from access to spectrum and technology, which is becoming more and more affordable. So, you know, and attempts to address this kind of disconnect between you know, exclusively licensed spectrum and license exempt have been growing over the last sort of, you know, 10 to 15 years. The first of its kind you've already heard about today, which is TV white space spectrum. So that's an attempt to reuse the television broadcast frequencies. And thanks to advocacy from a variety of actors in sub-Saharan Africa, TV white space regulation has actually emerged into formal regulation from pilots that began as far back as 2013 to actual formal regulation in Kenya, in Mozambique, and South Africa, which is great. However, the barrier to using these technologies has to be compared against license exempt spectrum. So Wi-Fi, you know, for a couple of $100, I can put up a broadband link that's, you know, that is hundreds of megabits per second, and it's pretty much plug and play. With TV white space, there is a geolocation database which must be logged into by the device. The equipment is more expensive, and often, you know, there are fees associated with the use of that database. And even the process for the regulator of authorizing a database provider has turned out to be a challenge, in that it's kind of new ground, in that the use of a spectrum geolocation database is novel, and therefore, you know, it's slow going for the implementation. So TV white space has been very frustrating as a technology in terms of its uptake for those reasons. I think if TV white space is going to succeed, then it has to be compared to Wi-Fi in terms of regulation. It has to be as easy to use as Wi-Fi, and it has to be in the same realm of affordability, because really, you know, if you were thinking about deploying a TV white space technology to get through some foliage or to, you know, solve an obstruction, you have to consider, well, wouldn't it be easier just to build another Wi-Fi tower and solve it that way? So that's the bar that has to be met. So I think, you know, for instance, regulators need to consider like creating an incubatory period where there are zero fees for the use of TV white space technologies, and a moratorium on import duties on TV white space technologies. It has to be stimulated. If it's not stimulated, then I think it's really going to struggle in terms of uptake as a technology. But I think there's another space here that has emerged over the last sort of, I'd say 5 to 8 years, and that's using shared spectrum, but not in the way that TV white space, which is a kind of dedicated access technology that's unique in and of itself, but rather in the use of shared IMT spectrum. So IMT stands for International Mobile Telecommunications, and that's the spectrum that the big operators use. So the mobile spectrum, as we know it, comes in many flavors now. It used to be, you know, in the origin of GSM, there were like 2 or 3 bands, and they varied a little from region to region. But now, you know, LTE, for example, has 40 bands that are possible to use for LTE services, which opens up a range of possibilities. And to date, typically regulators are only releasing that via auction, yet realizing that for many of these licenses that they are issuing, the uptake in rural areas is very, very low or non-existent by operators. So there's this spectrum that's not being used, and because of these exclusive use licenses, there's just no way of accessing it. So that's the change we're seeing now, and the change that I think, as civil society, we need to have more and more conversations with regulators about this. And I'll just talk about some examples of how this has been done. So in Mexico in 2016, the regulators set aside a specific amount of IMT spectrum for use by social purpose organizations for access in underserved communities and by indigenous communities. So that's one way, in that there is enough spectrum out there that that you can carve out a piece of IMT spectrum and say, look, this is for social use, and without actually impacting the needs of the largest operators. The United States has adopted a fairly complex approach to spectrum sharing with a three-tiered approach called the Citizens Broadband Radio Service, which operates in 3.5 gigahertz, and that has exclusive licenses owned by the government, a middle tier of licenses, which are 10-year called PAL licenses, 10-year licenses, but that apply to a much smaller geographic area. And then a third tier, which is the general access, which is kind of Wi-Fi like. So it allows for a range of different uses, but it's kind of very unique to the situation that the US finds itself in having the US military as the primary user. And it is a database-driven approach, much like inspired by TV white space technologies. A different approach has been taken by the United Kingdom in issuing two different kinds of licenses, a local access license and a shared access license. And that addresses both existing licenses and unused spectrum as well. So a shared access license has set aside spectrum, a bit like Mexico, and said, this spectrum will be shared and we will issue kind of licenses as and where we see fit in this band. The local access license is interesting in that it operates on existing spectrum licenses owned by the big operators. And it says where the big operators have not expressed an intention to deploy infrastructure, we will consider and issue local access licenses to allow reuse of that spectrum. And that is super exciting. And it's based on this principle of use it or share it in spectrum licenses. And this is the big change that needs civil society advocacy with the regulator to change the way spectrum licenses are issued. So right now, spectrum licenses in general guarantee exclusivity to the license holder. But what we want, rather, is to guarantee protection of guarantee protection from interference from the license holder. And that creates a mechanism for then the regulator to open up access to spectrum where the incumbent is not using it. And I think for me, the UK is the pioneer in this area. And in fact, Canada is now in the midst of a consultation on a shared access to spectrum for rural areas that is very much based on the UK approach. And finally, in New Zealand, for years, they have operated a managed spectrum park. So rather than issuing a license in 2.5 gigahertz to one operator for the entire country, they've said, we're taking this band, and it's only 40 megahertz of spectrum, and we're going to issue local licenses for it and treat it as a spectrum frequency to enable small operators. And so this is the frontier from my perspective, and it's what can really unlock access for small operators to deliver services via LTE and even 5G, which has a big impact in terms of the reach of the technology versus Wi-Fi, and also being able to speak directly to handsets. So that's it, really. I think that I think Kanchana is right in one point, from one point of view, in that you need to have practical examples to build on with the regulator. But I think it's also important to speak to the regulator to reveal these other things that are going on, because the problem of rural access exists everywhere. And unless we have mechanisms to unlock access to spectrum in rural areas, we're not going to solve the problem of affordable access to internet for everyone. So with that, I thank you, and certainly welcome any questions.
I have one quick question. Maybe I'll get the others thinking. When you say that Canada is taking a look at following in the footsteps potentially of the UK, and I couldn't agree with you more, the UK has really done an amazing job. What do you mean by that? I know we have proceedings going on. There are requests for comments. What does that mean, if you can explain to some folks on the call who may not actually know what an RFC is? Well, they know an RFC is in this context of the IETF, obviously, but a request for comments from our government. It's a similar issue, but what's the consequences there?
Great. So spectrum or telecommunications regulators are statutory bodies, and they operate in very similar ways in almost every country, in that when they wish to introduce new regulation, they often commission a research piece and issue a consultation. And these consultations issued by regulators are super important. They are kind of teachable moments in policy and regulation, because it is the one moment where the regulator has to listen to anyone who makes a submission. They have to take into account what you've said and demonstrate that they have taken it into account. So if you want to have an impact in terms of influencing regulation, responding to these consultations is absolutely critical, because it is the moment when the regulator is most open to input. So seizing the day in these consultations is key, and that can be intimidating, right? And hard. So I will say that one thing that we've been doing, and I say we with my APC hat on, is we've been capturing all of the submissions that we've been making to regulators on a wiki, and I'll put the link to the wiki there. But so if you are in the situation where there is a consultation by the regulator on license exempt or TV white space or spectrum sharing, you can look at other submissions from civil society organizations and use that as kind of grist for your thinking mill to decide how to input. I think there's a great need for a larger voice by civil society with regulators, which are typically dominated by the big operators. But we need to work together, to share the knowledge that we're gaining in terms of, how to have the most effective voice.
We don't do that, we end up with a status quo. So I think, Kanchana, actually, you're in the queue. So go ahead, Kanchana.
Thank you very much, Steve. I really learned a lot from your presentation. I really did not mean that we shouldn't ignore talking to convincing regulator. I think it's the job of someone like you to do that. Okay. For us inside the country, we need to convince them and show them that we need spectrum, we need this kind of thing. But we need to show them by working example. And for people like yourself, can convince them from the outside. from internationally, you can provide a kind of picture and convince them. I think we need to work together, and I'm sure there's not one way. There are many ways, but we need to collaborate. Right. Thank you.
100%. I couldn't agree more.
Mm-hmm.
I've stunned the audience into silence.
You have.
Yeah, maybe Steve, you delivered a very wonderful presentation during the first digital transformation with Telnet, and it sounds like the concept of community network, which you mentioned during the conference, was a very positive to the audience, and it's unfortunate that Margaret is no longer with Telnet, and there is I think a new acting CEO, and Stefan, I think we need to find a way on how to extend the discussion. Maybe as part of this, I was just asking, have you managed to extend further the discussion beyond the conference, or there is something like local engagement? Because I know recently, I think Telnet has been listed as one of the national ISP. So, and I'm also aware that Ubuntu Alliance and I think World Bank, something like that, they are supporting broadband through Telnet, and I have seen Telnet in Kenya doing a lot with the same bandwidth. So maybe basing on your existing networks, and I know that NSRC is also supporting Telnet in a number of events. I'm just curious to see how can we try to extend the same discussion and bring them on board if they could support the community network. But because one of the discussion they normally say is that they don't have the infrastructure, especially to beyond Dar es Salaam, but I know they have a good cooperation with other ISP like TTCL and others. So if we build a good case, then it will ease for us who are pushing for alternative and complementary approach like community network to take advantage of the bandwidth they have, because something staying there is somewhere no one is using it, while we are struggling in rural area with a lot of people disconnected. Maybe I could be happy to hear on top of that. Thank you.
Thanks, Madagora. Yeah, so what Madagora is referring to is I gave a talk to the National Research and Education Network of Tanzania a month ago, and I talked about access to the national fiber optic backbone, because I mean access to spectrum is important and is key, but if you can't get access to a high-speed backbone, then your spectrum is well, it's only a piece of the solution. And in sub-Saharan Africa, there is a lot of fiber optic backbones. There are over 1 million kilometers now of terrestrial fiber optic backbone, but it's dramatically underutilized. However, there has been a strong growth of national research and education networks, particularly in Eastern and Southern Africa, but also West Africa. And those national research and education networks have a lot in common with community networks in that they are not-for-profit entities that share the cost of access to the fiber optic backbone. And I think that is a very interesting model that that has the potential to unlock access for nonprofit operators and community networks, in that because these national research and education networks are already operating national high-speed networks, they can extend that access to community networks that are near them. I think the challenge is once again one of regulation, where they have to be allowed to do that. In often, they are constrained in only being able to connect educational institutions, and they're often constrained as well in terms of how they are licensed versus how the commercial network operators are licensed. So in general, I think there's this need to, from a regulatory point of view, to recognize nonprofit operators and create, a different regulatory environment for nonprofit operators, ranging all the way from national research and education networks down to small network operators. And I think part of that begins with advocacy for NRENs in general, in that I find them to be under-recognized by ministries of education or ministries of telecommunications. They don't see them as the strategic national assets that they are, because access to high-speed internet is the sine qua non of a modern university. So yeah, there's much more that can be done there.
Thank you for the plug for NRENs. Amazing resources that I couldn't agree more are underutilized or under-recognized. I put something quickly in the chat about we're hearing more and more about public access networks as well, being put together by some municipalities where NRENs, community networks, small ISPs could use those public access networks, but it is a matter of A, getting them built, or B, allowing more the regs and rules to change to allow for access there, interconnect. I don't think we see any more questions in the folks in the queue. Please use the Gaia channel. We could take questions there for, I know Steve, I think you're in it, as is Kanchana, Marco, and Jabera. And I think what Leandro and I will do is flip over to the great point made by Marco about having some informal meetings once a month, potentially, or every other month, where people come together in between Gaias to just talk about some of the issues that they have, solutions that they're seeing, almost sort of like a group help session where people could talk and see each other, but also stay in contact during this difficult period where we're not actually traveling as much. What I think Leandro and I would suggest is that you can either email us directly or go through the Gaia channel, because we could hack a solution there on how we could do it. Otherwise, then if we don't see any more questions, which I don't, no one else is in the queue, then we would thank Steve, Madagoro, Kanchana, and Marco for coming with us today to provide some context to how to connect more people around the planet, but also some of the technical solutions and regulatory policy solutions that are impacting the technical solutions for rollout. So thank you very much for joining us today. And Leandro, any other final words before we close?
Yeah, I had like a couple of slides just to close the session. Let me see if I can share the screen. Okay, just to say that this is a recurrent topic, and we have like a document that is from August to 2016, and the other topic is, well, you already introduced the interim meetings. So regarding the document that we published like 5 years ago, I wanted to just to comment that it's there, but I think it's worth to do an update. At least it's my impression, but I wanted to know more about the impression of others. So we need to discuss to what extent that RFC is still useful as it is, or we need to change focus to something that has emerged in the last few years, like for instance what we have covered in all the presentations of the Gaia working group. if it's feasible to update it. For that, we need volunteers. We need people to contribute text and coordinate the edition. And then we can discuss about what parts must be updated, which parts must be extended. And to that, I don't know if you took a look at the table of contents. This is the table of contents of that RFC. Well, it's detailed. It talks about alternative networks. There was some discussion about how to frame the space for, let's say, non-commercial operators, and as Steve was presenting before, how to throw smaller stones into the jar to fill in the gap, a gap that is measured in people unconnected, but is not measured in terms of business loss, because there is no business sometimes in those areas that are not attractive for the commercial operators. And then you can see in the middle that we discuss types of alternative networks, technologies employed, and then some layering issues with them. You can imagine that things have changed significantly in the last few years. And if you just take a look at the document, here it is, and you go through the document, you will see that there are many aspects that seem a little bit outdated, and at least the vocabulary has changed. And technologies, not so much, but still, like there are certain parts to be updated. So I was just reminding people that the document is there. If you can take a look and you see something that is worth to be modified, just let us know, Jane and me, so we can see how many people is willing to renew the RFC. And you see, for instance, the statistics from a few years ago that obviously need an update. Or regarding technologies, we learn things that works, things that do not work. There are new opportunities. So, well, let us know if you are willing to get involved a little bit in a refresh of the document or a rewrite or whatever. And that was my comment. I don't know if anyone has any question. Well, if
I
not,
think
okay.
Leandro, it's not a question, but I think it's something that we can agree on how we can update, because that time was very relevant, and in the current context, there are some text which need to be updated. So I think coming through the Gaias is something that we would be happy to do. And to me personally, because we have been also struggling a lot in Africa to engage the academia and other experts in Africa, especially in the contribution of the RFC and IETF activities. So I think this could be things like a good start for the engagement, because if one participates to such kind of activity, then you understand on how the request for comments can be updated and can be developed and things like that. So I know we have been pushing that with Kevin Chege from Internet Society, and there is progress, but the uptake is not yet there, because the participation of most African academia on the writing of RFCs is still very raw. So I think I support it, because we have some new context to update on the document. But second, also gaining the participation and the active participation, because I see community network picking up very, very strongly in Africa. So if we could also identify some few African resource people who could be part of it, then it also add value on the different agenda that we have been pushing, having African people contributing to IETF and RFC development. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, and I agree. And also we have to find how these documents support initiatives and are helpful. If helpful, I think people will be willing to contribute effort. So, well, any comment, question, we can open a thread of mail discussion in the list, in the mailing list, and see what we can do about it.
Sure.
Okay, so thank you very much. Thank you for joining yet another remote online IETF meeting. I hope to see you all in an upcoming monthly meeting as it was discussed, and well, looking forward for an opportunity to have a face-to-face IETF as well to recover the tradition. And I don't know, Jane, if you want to say something at the end.
Thank you. On the Gaia list, this would be great. I like your suggestion.
Okay, so thank you so much for coming, and yeah, see you so soon, and enjoy the rest of IETF sessions if you attend any, and we keep in touch. Bye, everyone.
Okay. Thank you. Bye.